The tension between Iran and Israel is no secret. For decades, these two nations have been locked in a political and military standoff. But recent developments have escalated the situation, raising concerns of a nuclear conflict that could have global repercussions. So, how did we get here, and what happens if this tension explodes into nuclear warfare? Let's start with the most recent events. In 2024, tensions between Israel and Iran reached new heights. Iran continues to advance its nuclear program, insisting that it's for peaceful purposes. However, Israel and much of the international community are not convinced. In recent months, Israeli officials have accused Iran of nearing nuclear weapons capability. Military confrontations have escalated, particularly in Syria and Lebanon, where Iran-backed groups like Hezbollah have clashed with Israeli forces. In response, Israel has conducted airstrikes targeting Iranian military installations in Syria and Lebanon, aiming to disrupt Iran's influence in the region. Meanwhile, Iran has accused Israel of sabotaging its nuclear facilities and assassinating key scientists. This cycle of retaliation has created an increasingly volatile situation. So, what happens if things take a drastic turn? If either nation launches a nuclear attack, the fallout would be catastrophic. For Israel, a small country, any nuclear strike could be devastating. Iran, with a much larger landmass, would also suffer irreparable damage. But the destruction wouldn't stop there. Let's break it down. In the immediate aftermath of a nuclear strike, millions of lives would be lost from the blast and radiation. The region would be thrown into chaos, with civilians, infrastructure, and essential services obliterated. But the consequences go far beyond the Middle East. The global impact of a nuclear war between Iran and Israel would be immense. Here's why. First, we would see severe environmental damage. A nuclear explosion creates a massive release of radiation, leading to nuclear fallout. Radioactive particles would spread across borders, affecting neighboring countries and potentially even continents, depending on the size of the attack and wind patterns. Agricultural systems could be disrupted, causing food shortages worldwide. Next, there's the political and economic fallout. A nuclear conflict in the Middle East, one of the world's most geopolitically sensitive regions, would send shockwaves through global markets. Oil prices would skyrocket, leading to economic instability across the world. And don't forget the military response. A nuclear exchange between Iran and Israel could easily draw in other powers. The United States, a key ally of Israel, and Russia, which has strategic ties with Iran, could be dragged into the conflict. NATO allies might also become involved, triggering a much larger international confrontation. A nuclear strike from either side could trigger a series of retaliations, turning a regional conflict into a global nuclear war. This is known as nuclear escalation. Once one nation uses nuclear weapons, the pressure to respond with equal or greater force becomes immense, and that's where things can spiral out of control. We're talking about potential strikes on major cities across the globe, from Washington to Moscow to European capitals. The result? A scenario that could lead to what many fear: global nuclear annihilation. So what can be done to stop this nightmare from becoming reality? Diplomacy and de-escalation are key. International organizations, including the United Nations, have been working to mediate between the two nations, but the situation remains fragile. Sanctions, arms control agreements, and peace talks are more critical now than ever. It's also essential that other world powers, especially the US, Russia, and China, take active roles in preventing any further escalation. Dialogue and diplomacy must be prioritized to avoid pushing the region and the world into a nuclear conflict. The situation between Iran and Israel is tense, and the possibility of a nuclear conflict is more real than many would like to admit. The consequences of such a war would be felt far beyond the Middle East, economically, politically, and environmentally. It's a sobering reminder that the path to peace is fragile, but it's also vital for the survival of not just these two nations, but the entire world. What do you think? Can diplomacy prevent a nuclear conflict between Iran and Israel? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.